Hey everyone! So I got some exciting news today. I'm going to be reading a fanfiction, Radioapple, of course. You guys know I love some Radioapple. But I got permission from Trash Demon X on Archive of Our Own to read Q is for Quid Pro Quo. So yeah, super excited. And this is going to be quite a long fan fiction. It's 11,650 words. It is one chapter, but half of it is going to be on YouTube. The second half gets quite spicy. So, we don't do that on YouTube. So if you guys want to see that, that will be on my top tier Soul Suckers on Patreon. So if you guys are interested, my link is in the description. And yeah, also I want to say a big thank you to my newest patron, Hello from the Other Side. Thank you so much for joining as a patron. I love you. Thank you so much. Alright, let's get on to this fanfiction, shall we? Alistair raises his newly refilled glass to the final patron left in the hotel's bar. Noticing that his breathing barely hitches when the King of Hell takes that as an invitation to come over to him.
Why would it?
He thinks as he does his best not to pay any mind to the slightly drunken sway of Lucifer's walk. Considering it's practically a nightly occurrence. Still, as his drinking partner attempts to take a seat in the bar stool opposite him, wavers, then steps on the metal pole around the bar for extra lift, Alistair finds it difficult to control his smirk. Part of him wants to laugh out loud, or even throw a few scathing remarks about the bumbling fool being vertically challenged. The other part of him is unreasonably fond of a sight he's growing far too accustomed to. To the point that when Lucifer overshoots and almost whacks his head against the bar, Alistair's first instinct isn't to mock him, but to catch him.
Steady on.
Alistair clicks his tongue as his arms are suddenly filled with far more of the king than he bargained for.
Are we 3 sheets to the wind already, my good fellow?
He does a double take right after, face momentarily heating up as he rolls his words around in his mind. It's hardly an endearment. In fact, it's barely even a pleasantry with the air of sarcasm he always keeps when Lucifer's around. And yet, it feels wrong. So wrong. Or rather, it feels far too telling. My good fellow. Hell, he needs another drink. Party har har, Al. Lucifer sighs heavily as he pushes himself out of Alistair's arms, keeping hold of him until he can safely sit down on the bar stool. He lets go as soon as he's stable, rolling his eyes at the way Alistair immediately wipes down everywhere he touched. Not because that touch burns, of course. Not in the slightest. Just lost my footing. It's slippery. Lucifer continues, slurring his words as he gestures at the metal bar a little too flamboyantly. That little maid of yours, Miffy? Yeah. I think she did too good of a job. You should, wait, no. I'll tell her myself tomorrow. Alistair is half tempted to correct him, but he lets it slide for the compliment he knows would make her year. Ever since Lucifer had decided to shack up in his hotel for extra protection after their successful overthrowing of heaven, Nifty had gone mad with trying to impress him. It was misguided, of course. But if it would earn him favor with the most powerful being in hell, then Alistair wasn't going to interfere with that. He's halfway through imagining just how he can manipulate those particular strings when movement from his peripheral snaps him right out of his scheming. Lucifer's hand slaps down on his leg, just above his knee, and he only just manages to stop himself from blowing every speaker in the hotel. Fuck. But hey, gotta hand it to your little crew. Lucifer continues like he isn't currently squeezing several tendons a little too hard. This place is spotless. Fuck.
All in a day's work, sire.
Alistair replies as soon as it seems appropriate in the designated flow of conversation, trying desperately not to show how many internal alarm bells are going off.
Cheers.
The raise of his glass should be the indication for the king to let him go to return the gesture. Instead, Lucifer picks up the glass with his other hand, leans on him while he clinks it against Alistair's, only letting him go to down half of his glass in one gulp. All while never breaking eye contact. They're hazy from the drink, but having those golden eyes looking straight into his soul is enough to set Alistair even further on the edge. It also makes his chest hot. Try as he might to deny it, he is already feeling clammy enough that loosening his bow tie quickly pushes itself to the top of his to-do list. He resists. Just. It's only when Lucifer finally averts his eyes that he sits more comfortably in his own stool, finally daring to brush his hand down his leg to wipe away that persistent touch. It brings him right back to the problem that's been bothering him for a few weeks. The one that popped into his head like a glaring warning on the night that Lucifer had brushed against his upper thigh in the middle of a particularly outlandish tale. When he'd laid in bed that night, unable to sleep despite the copious amounts of alcohol in his system. Where one question ran through his mind while the skin on his thigh burnt with the imprints of the surprisingly long fingers. Just how did all of this become so normal? Alistair finds himself repeating the same question as he watches Lucifer smooth out the wrinkles in his coat, finding himself instinctually keeping his whiskey glass next to his mouth to hide anything unbecoming in his smile. The development of their friendship was logical. Factors like proximity, time, and a reluctant sense of camaraderie at being less agile than their younger counterparts played a big part. They still snipped at each other on a daily basis, naturally, but it was surface level. Disagreements about the wallpaper, what food to serve at the grand reopening, if the hotel actually needed a damn spa, or if that was just frivolous nonsense. Which it was. But in moments like this, when everyone else was asleep, and their conversations were lubricated by alcohol and exhaustion, well, definitely brought a few of Alistair's walls down. Whether he wanted it or not. Speaking of, watching Lucifer go from resting the hand he's using to hold his glass to slowly leaning his entire arm on the bar immediately piques his interest. Alistair feels like he's a bull having red flags being waved in front of his face when a whole host of interesting details about the king's state of mind reveal themselves. The bags under his eyes are definitely deeper than usual, so Lucifer isn't sleeping again. Then there's the slight pinkish tinge to his cheeks, indicating he's even more drunk than Alistair initially thought. But the most intriguing detail, the one he should have noticed far earlier and now literally can't tear his eyes away from, is that Lucifer's lacking one important item of his usual attire. He's not wearing his gloves. Oh. Alistair clears his throat while bringing his glass to his lips, forcing himself to avert his gaze when he feels that heat return to his cheeks. He takes a sip of his drink, then another, then tries to come up with a way to avert his attention as quickly as possible.
You look worn out.
Lucifer jolts upright as if startled by his voice. those golden eyes narrowing to slits. Piss off. The familiarity of that tone immediately brings Alistair back to a harbor of safety. He takes another sip, realizing he's also draining his drink far quicker than usual, before using that little spark as a jumping-off point.
Charming,
Alistair replies, letting his annoyance trickle through as the sarcasm starts to drip from his tone.
I'm merely showing a little concern, Your Highness.
He slams his drink on the bar to purposely startle his companion again.
Maybe you should slow down a little,
Smile firmly in place, he gloats in the victory of having the upper hand, both figuratively and literally, with the way he can peer down at Lucifer from his vantage point, until the king immediately extinguishes that. Nope. Lucifer sways a little in his stool, laughing to himself in a way that's frustratingly melodic. The room's not spinning yet. He takes another sip, almost draining the rest of his glass before his face scrunches up from the strength of his drink, which Alistair forms another quip about, only to have it vanish when he feels a singular digit being jabbed in the center of his chest. Actually, you're the one who should catch up. The king taps him a few more times before a lazy smirk crawls over his face. I could use a bit of a sparring partner. Had an absolute doozy of a day, you know. Then he leans back in his stool, winks, and picks up his glass again, flaring Alistair's temper in an instant despite knowing full well he's being baited. Well, considering the little tidbit he'd managed to glean earlier, two could play at this game.
Ah, of course.
Alistair starts folding one leg over the other before leaning so far forward he's practically looming over the smaller man.
A lot of exhausting conversations about what wallpaper should go on the fourth floor corridor and the importance of, what was it?
He takes his time to get in position, stalling until his shadow can feed him Lucifer's exact words. The ones he had spoken in front of his mirror, clicking through different clothing options, thinking he was alone.
What in the 9 circles are you supposed to wear to a wedding nowadays?
Alistair starts imitating a near-perfect replica of the king's voice through his microphone. The combination of that and what he shouldn't know, enough to make Lucifer spit out his drink. How did you...
The father of the bride doesn't have a dress code, right? A single father, even less.
He continues, the inflection of the word single a new addition to the recital, but one that's worth its weight in gold for the way Lucifer's lip pulls into a snarl.
Maybe something regal will do, or is that upstaging?
Alistair throws his arms in the air before folding them over his chest, sticking his lip out in an exaggerated pout.
Oh, I'll be going naked at this rate,
he finishes, tapping his microphone twice before raising his brows mockingly.
Was it that little predicament that tipped you over,
Lucifer's eyes flicker with hellfire as he bares his teeth.
I'm going to fucking kill you!
At that, Alistair bursts out into a fit of laughter. It earns him the room spiking in temperature from King's rage, but he pays it no mind. Sparring partner indeed.
Over rumors and hearsay,
he continues, tilting his head mockingly at Lucifer's struggle to control his temper.
I was ready to dismiss that intel as fabrication, but considering that little outburst...
He lets the shrug of his shoulders say the rest, making his shadow chitter in a similar tone behind him as it joins in with the mirth it caused. Which is his first mistake. There's a crackle of what Alistair can only assume is holy light before he feels something tightening around his neck. In his inebriated state, he doesn't catch himself immediately clawing at his throat to remove nothing. Eyes snapping back to the cause of his panic, he sees the cause of his distress in a dramatic tableau. Lucifer, burning whip in hand that he's apparently pulled from thin air. The whip wraps around his shadow's throat, tightening by the second, forcing the quivering creature into a more corporal state, and onto its knees. Which is, no. So, it was you I saw today. Lucifer smirks, far too casual considering Alistair can feel his own skin prickling with ungodly heat. If you wanted to show, little guy, you could have just asked. No! An unnatural bond Alistair has with his shadow is usually his trump card, enabling quick getaways as well as being his eyes and ears behind otherwise closed doors. But with the king's eyes boring into the shadow, and somehow also right into him, while the strands of the whip feel like they're about to choke him out, he's suddenly regretting binding his part of his soul outside of his body. Especially when it makes him feel far too seen. You know, with all the sneaking around, I can see why it's tethered itself to your soul, Lucifer states as his shadow makes a noise that would be called a whine if its neck wasn't being constricted. You two are made for each other. Alistair clears his own throat only to find he almost mimics the sound himself at the impossibly real feeling of his skin being branded.
Implying?
Nothing much. With a click of his fingers, everything vanishes. The whip is nowhere to be seen. The shadow scurries away pitifully, with several whimpers, and Alistair has to dig his claws into his palms to stop himself from losing his mind from the whiplash, while Lucifer picks up his glass again, instantly evening the scoreboard between them, and then some. Alistair watches as he knocks his drink back, draining all but the dregs, before looking like he's struck by an idea out of nowhere. But yeah, since you're asking, he starts, pivoting on the chair to face Alistair again properly. Today I had all that, and so much more. Like fuck, do you know how many new sinners have joined us this week alone?
37.
Alistair thinks, frowns, then mentally corrects the number to 38, after remembering that the conjoined entity preferred to be thought of as two separate demons. He thinks about saying it out loud, or even purposefully giving Lucifer the wrong number to rile him up further. But upon glancing back at Lucifer's face, he quickly realizes that none of that is necessary. The king will dig that grave himself. Oh, right. How could you? Lucifer sneers, moving closer until he's barely balancing on the rim of his stool. You were up in your damn tower doing your little broadcast, and he puts his fingers back in the center of Alistair's chest, not helping. Again, the words are punctuated with fresh jabs, exactly like they'd been earlier. The only difference is that Lucifer's face is now a mere few inches away from his own, with the rest of him invading more and more of his personal space. So much that Alistair is taken aback by how his eyes are shining, even with the effects of copious amounts of alcohol in his system. In the dim light of the bar, they practically shimmer, betraying that their owner's rage has a tint of mirth to it. The different golden tones entwined together, never quite still. The display of divinity swirling in a dance that's quite frankly awe-inspiring and undeniably beautiful. Just like him.
What?
You're all talk, no action, Alistair. Lucifer continues, snapping him out of that unnecessary train of thought. Literally. Thinking fast and needing to break eye contact, Alistair simply redirects his attention to his own glass.
I resent that.
Of course you do. Lucifer scoffs, goes to do the same, and then finds he's drained it dry. Idiot. Damn. Empty already. What Alistair expects is for the king to hop off his seat, pour another, then come back to continue their tete-a-tete seamlessly. Like always. What actually happens is he feels those eyes on him again, burning the side of his cheek as he finishes the rest of his glass in 2 gulps. It's unnerving and confusing when they don't leave him, almost making him wonder if he's got something on his face. Then it hits him. Lucifer expects an offer to refill his drink, since he'll be getting his own. Ha!
What a pity.
Alistair responds, hiding his growing smirk while standing with ease, before walking around the bar to pick his favorite whiskey off the shelf.
Sounds like a problem entirely of your own making.
The exaggerated whine in response is music to his ears. Don't be like that, Lucifer pouts. That much is evident in his tone, even without looking at him. Before his tone turns to demanding. Pour me one too. Alistair considers berating him for acting like a petulant child, or even mocking him for forgetting he has a wealth of magical powers to call upon to do the task for him. But when he turns around to see the King of Hell, with his face on the counter, looking up at him with pleading eyes while tapping the glass closer, something inside him lights up like a Christmas tree. Never one to pass when opportunity comes knocking, he instantly changes his tune.
What, pray tell?
He walks his fingers slowly across the bar top, stopping right before he gets to Lucifer's glass.
Would be in this for me.
There's a beat. One where Alistair ponders that he's pushing his luck a little too soon, with the burn of that whip still throbbing around his neck. His worries are short-lived, however, when the king instantly perks up at the idea of getting his way. The joy of my company? Lucifer answers, huffing when Alistair doesn't move a muscle in response. Riveting conversation? Once again, Alistair stays silent, containing every urge he has to burst out laughing at Lucifer losing his footing. Figuratively, and almost literally, with the way he sways in the stool before finally giving in. Ugh, fine. Lucifer sighs heavily before sitting up straight, pushing his hair out of his eyes. He immediately fixes on Alistair. I'm down for a little quid pro quo. Name your price. Alistair can't hide the way his smile immediately widens at those words. Static buzzes around him, thick with anticipation at the words he couldn't even dream of hearing finally leaving the king's lips. A price, one he could name. The devil himself offering what he's been working to obtain for all these years on a silver. No need to look too excited, Lucifer interjects, leaning over the bar to push his glass properly into Alistair's hand. A comparable price, or I'm not playing. Of course. Alistair clears his throat and the residual static from the atmosphere around him before wiping away the blackened drool he could feel gathering at the corner of his mouth. He takes Lucifer's glass, using the time it takes to locate the half-decent brandy the king favors to come up with an alternative. Or, rather, if Lucifer was game, a series of alternatives that could definitely get him closer to his vision of shaking the devil's hand to feel that surge of incomparable power. Not to mention the other thing. The puzzling itch that's getting harder to ignore. One that will hopefully be satiated if he can pull a few personal details out of Lucifer for him to process later. When returning to his quarters, alone. The warmth he successfully fought off returns with a vengeance when he turns to see Lucifer all but sprawled over the counter, whimpering absent-mindedly to himself while biting his lower lip. which doesn't require Alistair to be the whore of Babylon to imagine in another light.
Understood.
He makes sure Lucifer is watching him again before pouring out several measures of brandy into his glass.
Perhaps you'll answer a question that's been on my mind recently.
He tries to keep his tone level and unassuming, intent on luring the king into a false sense of security. Sure, I'm an open book. Lucifer rolls his head on the bar a little before smiling lazily up at Alistair. Hit me. Like candy from a baby.
When you fell from heaven all those many, many years ago.
Alistair starts, placing the drink in Lucifer's outstretched hand, fingers lingering a few beats too long before he delivers the punchline.
Did it hurt?
At first, there's silence, unless he counts the almost audible sounds of Lucifer processing what he said behind those hazy eyes, quickly replaced by the outright wheeze when it hits. But Alistair's prepared, keeping his unwavering smile plastered in place as Lucifer scrambles back upright to avoid choking on the breath he can't catch. Oh fuck, you got me there. Lucifer says between further gasps of breath that keep threatening to turn into laughter. Good one, Al. He goes to take a sip of his drink, but Alistair's already a step ahead and snatching it away. He teases, waving a finger in the space near Lucifer's lips that the glass previously occupied.
No answer, no drink.
You can't be serious. Lucifer snaps back, eyes going wide as he looks between Alistair and the finger dangerously close to his face. You know that's a fucking pickup line, right? Bingo!
Naturally.
Alistair answers with rehearsed ease, twisting his finger a full 180 so he can use it to tilt up Lucifer's chin.
But the truth of the matter is, I'm genuinely curious.
He knows he's on the line, that all it would take is Lucifer calling him out for the suggestive nature and he'd be forced to back off to save face. But when emboldened by alcohol, he is aware he's quite the force to be reckoned with. And luck is definitely on his side today. It takes a few beats, a few seconds of nothing but alarm that quickly devolves into the reaction he was looking for. Lucifer's face flushes a bright pink while a barely suppressed squeak squeezes its way through his teeth, proving that while the king may be able to go toe-to-toe with Alistair in terms of wit and verbal sparring, he's unable to take what he dishes out. Especially when it comes to flirting. Something that even if it's blatantly part of their power play, Alistair can't deny that he's finding amusing. As soon as he recovers, Lucifer's eyes immediately start scanning his, as if trying to figure out if he's being sincere or not. Which Alistair gives him no indication of either way, keeping his grin fixed in place. If only to hide how he wants to gloat from being to pull such a delicious reaction out of Lucifer. One he hopes to see again before the night is out. Somewhat more settled, Lucifer swallows heavily before raising a brow. Really?
Really?
Alistair answers, actively trying to keep his breathing even, dropping his tone lower. Tone earns him another shudder. Is it really that easy? He removes his finger, passes the king back his glass, and waits. Well, yeah, of course it did. Lucifer laughs, shaking his head in disbelief before he wets his lips with a furrowed brow. Try to imagine the worst pain ever, then multiply it by 1,000, or, wait, hold on. Without warning, Lucifer's hand shoots out to grab his arm. There's another flash of light, and then the touch actually starts to burn, even through several layers of clothing. to the point where Alistair is about to yell at him to get off when a series of images flood his mind. No, not images. Memories. His death. The moment his soul left his body before being immediately pulled down through the wet dirt of the forest that night. The feeling of falling. The moment where every one of his sins manifested, all the cuts he'd made, and countless victims appearing on his own flesh, threatening to tear his skin apart at the seams, before feeling the call to the void that stitched him back together. For a price, of course. When Lucifer lets go, he's left panting, head swimming from more than just intoxication as he's once again reminded of who he's dealing with. Damn, you had it bad, Lucifer remarks matter-of-factly, making Alistair's blood boil anew before he continues. So, it felt like that, but so much worse. My body was burnt as I was still falling. It's why I usually wear the gloves. I'm still covered in the evidence thousands of years later, to the point I can't remember what I... He pauses, taking a deep breath and blinking rapidly a few times, almost making Alistair think that he's done. Then he's met with the sight of those golden eyes turning far paler than he's ever seen them. Which sets off an entirely different set of alarm bells for Alistair when he has to resist the urge to reach out and soothe the slightly damp cheek that's well within his reach. Well, there's no point in dwelling on that now, is there? It was painful, but I could take it. Lucifer rubs his thumb on his glass, seemingly even more lost in thought than before. But Lilith? She was the first human to fall, so I guess they hadn't fine-tuned the process. He lets out a huff of a laugh full of barely concealed anger, one that makes Alistair's skin prickle and slams him with the need to pay attention. Transforming into a demon took her weeks. I thought I'd lost her several times, too. She went mad with agony, writhing in pain for days on end, almost unreachable until her body finally adjusted. He shakes his head, eyes glistening in the low light. Just thinking about what they put her through makes me sick. With that, the king finally picks up the glass he's been toying with before downing the entire thing in a single mouthful, shaking his head immediately afterwards while his face scrunches up from the bitter taste. While Alistair's rendered momentarily speechless. Of course, he'd expected some of the story, but not for Lucifer to hand over the depth of that information so willingly. From the way the room is blurred around the edges before he brings his own glass back to his lips, he knows the drink is playing a big part in both of their lowered inhibitions. But, at the same time, Lucifer's lips are looser than he's ever known them to be in any previous conversations. Almost like he needs to get this off his chest. And even though it feels somewhat dangerous, Alistair wants to see how far the rabbit hole goes.
Fascinating,
He responds, picking his next words carefully.
So, how did your beloved take to her new form?
Lucifer counters, mimicking his earlier tone while sliding his glass back towards Alistair's hand. One answer, one drink. The statement isn't given long to hang in the air, with Alistair immediately conceding, refilling the glass with nothing more than a quirk of his brow when he passes it back, which Lucifer takes as his cue to continue. Badly, at first. Then better. Strength to strength, in fact. And even though there was a lot of back and forth on how she felt being scorned, well... He chuckles softly, eyes glazing over, with something that seems to flood him with mixed emotions. I was worth it, apparently. For a few millennia, at least. Alistair has to literally bite the inside of his mouth to hold back his own surge. He wants to ask what caused that flare, as if it will help him pick apart the enigma that is Lucifer, while at the same time wanting to change the subject now. Because just thinking about Lucifer with anyone else is... Wait. Wincing, Alistair immediately blames the alcohol for both the misplaced jealousy and the fact he's not immediately pushing the feeling down, with his mouth opening before he has the chance to stop it.
I find that hard to believe.
Lucifer pauses mid-sip, attention snapping back toward him. Meaning?
Well, I've heard stories about your wife. Apologies, your former wife.
He tops off their glasses using that, and the time it takes him to finally return to his seat as a chance to cobble together his next move.
Her beauty is quite literally legendary. That ability to seduce anyone to her cause, too. Swaying an entire crowd with the bat of her lashes, or a wave of her hand.
Pausing for effect, Alistair takes in the returning scowl and general confusion over Lucifer's face for a few beats, before moving in for the kill.
And from what I've witnessed from several months of cohabiting.
He leans over Lucifer, placing a hand on the bar before dropping his voice down to a whisper.
You have quite the opposite effect.
The delivery is perfect. The intimidation factor with the way he's looming over the king's far smaller form, again just adding to the effect. The way Lucifer looks up at him while his blush darkens proves as much, as well as the way he immediately sets his drink back on the bar. What sends alarm bells ringing is a smile that grows at an alarming rate after. Well, actually, that's part of my charm. Lucifer looks up at him, acting completely unfazed, despite the fact he should be at a disadvantage. And you know what they say about opposites attracting. There's a pause. One where Alistair is genuinely unsure if he's expected to answer, while realizing he's not in the middle of the victory he thought he was taking. But then Lucifer ups the ante again. Well, that and the whole. He brings a hand to his mouth, making an obscene gesture with 2 fingers before flicking his tongue out between them. His forked, agile, and surprisingly long tongue. The heat is back and it's scolding.
Oh my, Lucifer. What a jokester you are.
Alistair responds, holding both his position and smile firmly in place, refusing to let this be the thing that makes him back down.
You're expecting me to believe that's what caused the fall of humanity?
I've been told I have a silver tongue in more ways than one. Alistair hopes his face shifts into an expression portraying disbelief, thinking that's the end of it, seconds before almost dropping off his face completely when he feels 2 hands gripping his lapels, pulling him so close he can smell the brandy on Lucifer's breath. You'll have to take my word for it. The king practically purrs before that damn tongue flicks out again, dragging across his teeth. Unless you want to find out yourself. Shit! Static drowns out any other sound in the hotel bar while the lights flicker on and off, seconds before Lucifer bursts out laughing. I'm joking. Lucifer scoffs, letting him go before picking up his drink again. No need to look so put out, though, jeez. Relief washes over Alistair like a wave. He should be thankful his reaction was taken for one of disgust, not the impulse to throw sanity to the wind and take him up on the offer he was seconds away from following through on. He knows it's the alcohol, that and the worst timing for his infrequent baser instincts to decide to rear their ugly heads. That alone should be his indication to leave. But he can't. Because there's just something about the way the king is acting tonight that's compelling him to stay. Out of curiosity alone, of course. Not because he's feeling an unfamiliar stirring in his lower half. My turn now. And I've got a question for you, Al. Ever the master of irony, Lucifer managed to interject the ridiculous thoughts about him just as Alistair has the sense to cross his legs and prevent any problems from escalating. They both pick up their drinks, almost simultaneously, with the whole situation causing Alistair to take a much longer sip than he initially intended before taking the bait.
And how did you come to that conclusion?
I might be drunk, but I can keep count. Lucifer once again swings the pendulum back to Alistair's personal space by following him until he's so far forward in his chair he needs to hold the bar for balance. That was technically 2 questions in a row. You owe me one. It takes a few moments of blinking rapidly while replaying what happened before Lucifer's obscene offer before Alistair realizes that the king is technically and unfortunately right. That alone shouldn't be alarming, but makes him feel like his heart is drumming in his chest as he tries to run through every possible question Lucifer could ask him.
Quite.
Alistair answers, using every brain cell not laden with alcohol to keep his tone on an even keel.
The floor is yours.
Tell me why you choose to spend your nights with me. Lucifer asks, his own smile going unnaturally wide, while refusing to break eye contact. If you hate me that damn much.
What a ridiculous...
Oh, and you gotta tell the truth. Lucifer interrupts, leaning in so far Alistair is left wondering how he's able to balance at all. I'll know. Fuck! He's too close. Far too close. Lucifer's eyes are far too focused on Alistair's face for him to even be able to think of a way to spin this in his favor. Let alone quip back, because he's too damn fucking close.
You're entertaining.
The answer blurts out when Alistair realizes he's left it far too long without an answer. It should be enough, but the proximity combined with his already loosened tongue has him adding another, even more telling addendum.
And I don't hate you.
At the tone of Lucifer's cheeks switch from pink to red, it's clear the blush he's sporting is no longer something caused by the alcohol alone. And yet, Alistair quickly runs through the list of alternative reasons why the king averts his gaze. Because how can he go for the obvious reason when that would mean addressing the heat crawling its way back up his neck? No. Lucifer adds with a chuckle, flitting his eyes in Alistair's direction for a less than second. What do you think about me then? Alistair opens his mouth, despite his chest tightening from the directness, while flicking through his mental Rolodex for something biting yet playful. When his mind only supplies him with different ways to continue their flirty tone, he's not as repulsed as he should be. He immediately dismisses several of the more risque ones, even images of what unsure I need a much closer look would entail definitely make him feel like he's overheating. Quips of a more reserved nature start to dance on his tongue, but then Alistair's mouth curls into a grin when the obvious hits him.
I believe it's my turn,
he replies, enjoying the way Lucifer's brows immediately raise when he completely crowds him in his stool.
Sire.
His tone dropping to a purr isn't intentional. He knows it, and so does Lucifer with the way those golden eyes immediately dart all over his face, lingering far too long on his lips. He expects the king to push him off, to finally call quits to the secondary game they're playing despite how thrillingly addictive it's becoming. But Lucifer does the opposite. Fair enough, he answers with a click of his tongue, opening his legs in a gesture that can only be read as an invitation. What do you want, Alistair? Fuck. There's a beat. One where Alistair considers giving up every principle and sense of propriety he has to risk everything for the forbidden fruit being dangled in front of him. It's not like him to crave such things, and yet something about the way Lucifer tilts his neck to the side when he doesn't reply right away stirs feelings inside of him he hasn't felt in an age. The way that vast expanse of white flesh is exposed to him with that simple move would make men far stronger than him crumble. Plus, there's who's offering it. The fucking king of hell. Who is he to resist? With his head clouded with drink that he's tempted to pour himself several more of, it shouldn't surprise Alistair that it takes him a few moments to realize it's simply another move. There's a shift in the scant atmosphere between them, but it's all for show. Lucifer is definitely calling his bluff back. Well, well, well. Something inside Alistair snaps. He licks his lips both in mockery and to clear some of the saliva gathering in his mouth. He sees his opportunity to turn up the heat tenfold, which he takes without hesitation.
What do I want?
It's the question, rolling the words in his mouth like they're the finest delicacy in the world as he lets his powers take out some of the lights in the bar.
Well, considering you seem intent on bragging about your, what did you call it?
He imitates Lucifer's lingering gaze on those cherubic lips.
Silver tongue.
He invades the space between them even further until the king has to crane his neck upward to look at him, which Lucifer does, never taking those eyes off him.
Plus, your reputation as the father of lies leaves one wondering just how far that...
Get to the fucking point, Al. Lucifer interrupts, narrowing his eyes, trying to pretend he's not using that snip to cover the way he's squirming in his seat from the proximity that keeps getting closer and closer, to the point Alistair can almost feel that irregular breath on his lips.
I guess patience isn't a virtue you weren't blessed with.
He chuckles when he only gets him another scoff in response, but the misdirect does its job, luring Lucifer back into a false sense of security until he goes in for the kill.
I want you to try and seduce me.
At first, the only sound to be heard over the soft static ambiance is Lucifer's elevated breathing. Then he laughs. Not a mocking tone or amused titter like before, but erratic. He's nervous. Interesting. you can't be serious. Lucifer finally responds, unintentionally shifting backwards, further showing his discomfort, which Alistair allows, even if he doesn't let up.
Humor me,
he adds, picking up his glass while never taking his eyes off the king.
Unless you're content in only exchanging mere questions until the sun comes up.
That, surprisingly, is what causes Lucifer to stiffen up completely. His flush deepens several shades as he reaches for his own drink without saying a word. He pauses, eyes briefly darting everywhere but the space Alistair is occupying, while rolling his bottom lip between his teeth, making him think he's won for a few short moments until the king drains his glass without hesitation, turning back to him properly with a smile that renders him instantly breathless. All right, then. Oh. Doing his best not to react, every cell and Alistair's body starts screaming as those golden eyes lid and he gets treated to the sight of the king's forked tongue flicking out to wet his lips. While the blush still sits heavily on his cheeks, his demeanor has entirely flipped. Where Lucifer had tried to escape Alistair's more imposing frame, he now takes the momentary gap between them as an invitation. Alright, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Yes, I know, it's a very long fanfic, but so freaking worth it. I loved reading it for the first time, and I had to ask if I could read this because, oh my god, it's so good. It's so good. Thank you again so much for Trash Demon X for writing this and letting me voice it and read it. Again, I loved it so much I had to share it with you guys. And if you want to read along as well, like I said, the link is in the description. Again, it's the Fanfiction by Trash Demon X. Q is for Quid Pro Quo. Thank you for listening.